Imagine this moment. You're in a meeting, or sitting at the dinner table with people you know well. Someone says something that crosses a line, subtle, dismissive, unfair. Not loud enough to justify a scene, but sharp enough that you feel it. Before you can think, your body reacts. Your chest tightens, your heart starts racing, your throat closes like words are physically blocked from getting out. There's a split second where your mind screams, "Say something, defend yourself, this isn't okay." And then, nothing. You smile, you nod. Maybe you let out a quiet laugh. You say, "It's fine," or "I get what you mean." The moment passes. From the outside, it looks like maturity, calm, emotional control. But inside, something heavy settles in your chest. A cold mix of relief and self-betrayal. Relief that the tension is over, and shame for not speaking when it mattered. Later, you replay the scene in your head. You think of all the things you should have said. You promise yourself that next time will be different, that you won't let people talk to you like that again. But deep down, you know the truth. You didn't choose silence. Your body chose safety. And that invisible freeze, that moment where your voice disappears, isn't a personality flaw. It's a survival response that learned long ago that speaking up wasn't safe. Let's remove the shame right away. Avoiding conflict does not mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you lack confidence, boundaries, or self-respect. And it certainly doesn't mean you're too sensitive. What it means is that your nervous system learned a very specific way to keep you safe. Most people are familiar with the classic stress responses: fight or flight. You either push back or you escape. But there are two others that matter deeply here: freeze and fawn. When conflict avoiders sense tension, a raised voice, a critical tone, a shift in energy, their system often defaults to the fawn response. This is the instinct to placate, agree, soften, or disappear emotionally in order to reduce threat. It's not a conscious choice. It happens before logic has time to intervene. Your brain isn't asking, "What do I want to say?" It's asking, "How do I make this stop?" At a biological level, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, detects conflict as danger. And for you, social rejection doesn't register as discomfort. It registers as risk. Historically, being excluded from the group meant losing protection, resources, and survival itself. So your system chooses the strategy that once worked best: submission. By smiling, by agreeing, by apologizing when you did nothing wrong. Cortisol floods your body, preparing you for threat. But instead of mobilizing you to fight, your nervous system guides you to blend in, to soothe, to stay likable. You become less visible, not because you don't matter, but because invisibility once meant safety. This isn't who you are. It's what kept you alive. Here's the part most people misunderstand. You're not overreacting to conflict. Your nervous system is reacting accurately, based on old information. When someone disagrees with you, challenges you, or expresses frustration, your body doesn't interpret it as a difference of opinion. It interprets it as a rupture in safety, a signal that connection might be at risk. That reaction begins in the amygdala, the brain's threat detector. Its job isn't to be reasonable, it's to be fast. And it doesn't distinguish between a physical threat and a social one. To your nervous system, an angry tone or disappointed look can carry the same urgency as danger. Evolutionarily, this made sense. Humans survived in groups. Being rejected by the tribe didn't just hurt emotionally, it meant exposure, hunger, and death. So the brain learned to treat social conflict as something to avoid at all costs. The problem is that your nervous system never updated the rules. So today, a performance review feels like standing trial. A tense conversation with a partner feels like abandonment waiting to happen. A disagreement with a friend feels like the beginning of the end. Your body responds before your adult mind can remind you, I'm safe, I can handle this. Your heart races, your throat tightens, your thoughts narrow, and suddenly, saying what you actually feel seems dangerous. Not because it is, but because your system learned long ago that speaking up came with consequences. This is why confidence alone doesn't fix conflict avoidance. This is why just be assertive never works. You can't logic your way out of a nervous system that's trying to protect you. First, it has to learn that disagreement is no longer a threat, it's a conversation. We are not born afraid of our own voices. Children speak freely. They protest. They ask why. They express anger, sadness, and disagreement without shame. If your voice disappeared later in life, it's because something taught you that using it wasn't safe. For many chronic conflict avoiders, that lesson was learned at home. In some families, conflict was loud and explosive. A parent's anger was unpredictable. Yelling, criticism, emotional volatility. You learned quickly that disagreement had consequences. So you became hyper-vigilant. You read tone shifts. You watched facial expressions. You learned that staying quiet, agreeable, and small kept the peace. In that environment, invisibility felt like safety. In other families, the lesson was quieter but just as powerful. Love was conditional. There may not have been shouting, but there was withdrawal, silence, disappointment. When you expressed anger, sadness, or needs, you were met with emotional distance. You were praised for being easy, mature, or good. And over time, you learned what those words really meant. Don't cause problems. This is how the good child is created. Many children in these environments were also subtly parentified, emotionally attuned to others, responsible for managing moods that weren't theirs to manage. Your needs became secondary. Harmony became your job. The belief that formed wasn't conscious, but it was powerful. I am lovable when I make others comfortable. If I speak up, I risk losing connection. That belief doesn't disappear when you grow up. It follows you into workplaces, friendships, and romantic relationships. Every disagreement wakes up that child logic. If I'm difficult, I'll be abandoned. So you stay quiet, you accommodate, you apologize, not because you don't have boundaries, but because, once upon a time, silence was how you stayed connected. At this point, many people start to ask a painful question. Why do I care so much? Why does the possibility of disappointing someone feel unbearable? Why does speaking up trigger guilt, panic, or the urge to explain yourself into exhaustion? This is where attachment and shame quietly take over. If you grew up needing connection to feel safe, your nervous system learned to prioritize attachment over authenticity. For many conflict avoiders, this shows up as an anxious or fearful attachment pattern, a deep sensitivity to emotional distance, rejection, or disapproval. Disagreement doesn't feel neutral. It feels like the beginning of separation. But attachment alone doesn't keep you silent. Shame does. Shame is not the feeling of doing something wrong. Shame is the belief that you are wrong. Over time, many people internalize the idea that their needs are too much, their emotions are inconvenient, and their boundaries make them difficult to love. So when conflict arises, it's not just fear of the other person's reaction. It's fear of confirming the worst belief about yourself. If I speak up, they'll see who I really am. And if they see that, they'll leave. So you manage yourself instead. You soften your words. You over-explain. You minimize what hurts. You take responsibility for other people's comfort while quietly abandoning your own. This is why conflict avoidance feels compulsive, not chosen. You're not just trying to keep the peace. You're trying to stay lovable. And here's the truth most people never hear. It's not that you fear conflict. You fear being unworthy of connection. Until shame loosens its grip, silence will always feel safer than honesty, even when that silence slowly erases you. It's easy to believe that avoiding conflict keeps things calm. On the surface, nothing explodes. Relationships stay intact. No one storms out. You remain the easy one, the reliable one. But inside, something very different is happening, because conflict doesn't disappear when you avoid it. It relocates. Every time you swallow your anger, your fear, or your hurt, your body has to hold it, and the body remembers what the mouth never said. Tension builds quietly, in your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach. You wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. Headaches become normal. Digestive issues, chronic fatigue, anxiety that seems to have no clear cause. This is the pressure cooker effect. Repressed emotions don't dissolve, they turn inward. Then comes resentment. When you say yes but mean no, you create an invisible debt. You start to feel unappreciated, used, taken for granted. You think, after everything I do for them, how can they treat me this way? But they don't know you're sacrificing yourself. They think you're choosing it. So resentment leaks out sideways, through sarcasm, emotional withdrawal, passive aggression, or quiet self-sabotage. The very relationships you're trying to protect begin to corrode. And over time, something deeper erodes, your sense of self. Each act of silence sends a message inward. My feelings don't matter. You become adaptable, agreeable, likable, but no longer known. You reflect what others want until you lose touch with who you are. You're not at peace, you're under pressure. At some point, many conflict avoiders comfort themselves with a familiar story. I'm just a nice person, nice, easygoing, low maintenance, the one who doesn't make waves. On the surface it sounds like a virtue, but psychologically, this version of niceness often hides something much less noble: fear. Niceness in this context is not generosity, it's a strategy, a way to manage other people's reactions so you don't have to feel their disappointment, anger, or withdrawal. You're not being nice because you want to. You're being nice because you're afraid of what will happen if you're not. That makes niceness a form of self-protection disguised as morality. Kindness is different. Kindness is rooted in truth, not control. Kindness is telling a friend something they don't want to hear because you care about their well-being. Kindness is ending a relationship you've outgrown instead of staying to avoid guilt. Real kindness is willing to risk discomfort for honesty. Avoiding conflict often means choosing niceness over kindness, choosing immediate safety over long-term integrity. It keeps things smooth on the surface, but hollow underneath. And here's the part that matters most. Niceness wasn't your flaw. It was your adaptation. You learned that being agreeable kept you connected, that being pleasant made you safer. But what once protected you is now keeping you small. Because relationships built on niceness don't know the real you. They know a version designed to be accepted. And acceptance without authenticity is not love, it's performance. For many conflict avoiders, the fear isn't just about disagreement, it's about what disagreement might turn them into. There's a quiet terror beneath the surface. If I speak up, I'll become harsh, demanding, just like the people who hurt me. So silence feels safer than risking becoming the villain in your own story. But here's the truth that changes everything. Boundaries are not aggression, and conflict is not cruelty. Healthy conflict is not about overpowering someone or winning an argument. It's about naming your inner reality without attacking theirs. Assertiveness says, "This is what I feel. This is what I need." Aggression says, "Your needs don't matter." They are not the same. Many people confuse boundaries with punishment because they were raised in environments where limits were enforced with anger, withdrawal, or control. So when you imagine setting a boundary, your body expects backlash, raised voices, rejection, abandonment. But boundaries are not walls, they're doors. They tell people how to stay in relationship with you. It's also important to say this: not every situation calls for confrontation. Some people are unsafe. Some moments are poorly timed. Choosing not to engage can be wisdom, not avoidance, when it comes from clarity instead of fear. The difference is subtle but crucial. Avoidance is silence to stay liked. Boundaries are clarity to stay whole. Relearning healthy conflict means realizing that disagreement doesn't destroy connection. It defines it. Without boundaries, relationships become performances. With them, they become real, and real connection can tolerate tension. By now, it should be clear, conflict avoidance isn't a mindset problem. It's a nervous system pattern, which means you can't heal it by forcing confidence or rehearsing the right words in your head. You heal it by teaching your body that disagreement is no longer dangerous. The first step is slowing the moment down. The fawn response is fast, automatic. You agree before you even realize you're doing it. So your new goal isn't to speak perfectly, it's to buy time. Simple phrases like, "Let me think about that," or "I need a moment to get back to you," interrupt the reflex and allow your system to settle. Next comes gentle exposure. Not dramatic confrontations, micro confrontations. Sending food back when it's wrong. Saying no to a small request. Disagreeing about something low stakes. Your heart will race. You'll feel guilt. This is not failure, it's retraining. You're teaching your body, I spoke up and I survived. And yes, the guilt will come. That guilt isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's the residue of an old pattern breaking apart. There's a difference between toxic guilt, learned from fear, and earned guilt, which comes from harm. Most of what you'll feel at first is the former. With time, self-trust replaces self-erasure. Not because you became fearless, but because your nervous system learned it doesn't have to disappear to be safe. There is a price to silence that rarely gets talked about. It's not loud, it doesn't show up all at once. It shows up years later, in the quiet sense that your life doesn't quite feel like yours. In relationships where you're appreciated, but not truly known. In a lingering feeling that you've been living slightly off-center, adjusting yourself to fit instead of standing where you actually belong. Peace that is built on silence is not peace, it's compliance. When you silence yourself to keep others comfortable, you may avoid conflict, but you also avoid intimacy. Because real connection requires friction. It requires truth, and truth cannot exist where your voice is missing. Using your voice doesn't mean becoming loud or aggressive. It means trusting that you can tolerate disagreement without disappearing. It means believing that even if someone is disappointed, upset, or doesn't understand you, you will still be okay. That kind of peace doesn't come from being liked by everyone. It comes from being aligned with yourself. And the quiet power of using your voice isn't that it changes other people, it's that it brings you back to yourself. If this video resonated with you, if it put words to something you've lived but never fully named, you're not alone. This channel is a space where we talk about the quiet, unseen patterns that shape our relationships and our sense of self. If you'd like to continue this conversation, consider subscribing. And if you feel safe, leave a comment below. Share what silence has cost you, or what using your voice might finally give you. Thank you for being here.